Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the All Hands on Deck show. I'm Reverend Ira Ackery, and we're here as a voice of the community. We're here to empower the masses and to encourage the marginalized. On today, as we come here every Tuesday, we're talking about leveling the playing field, and today we have someone who I'm very excited, one of my partners in crime, who's out here on the front line. He's the pastor of the New Mount Pilgrim Baptist Church. He's the chairman of the Leaders Network, and he's the chairman of the board of Chicago State University, Reverend Marshall Elijah Hatch, Sr. Welcome to All Hands on Deck.
Glad to be here, Reverend Ackery, and we want to thank you for allowing us to come on the show today. We appreciate all of your work, all the time. One of the tireless activist pastors in our community, great man of God. Thank you.
It is so much to talk about today. I want to talk about the gubernatorial race. I want to talk about...
It's hot.
It's very hot. And I want to talk about Barrios race.
It's
Richard
hot.
Boykin. It's all hot. It's all hot. Let me start off with this statement that I want to make to all of Chicago, all of Illinois. And it's my personal statement, Pastor Ira Ackery's statement about J.B. Pritzker's unfortunate racial remarks on the wiretapped conversation between he and the incarcerated former Governor Blagojevich. Watching J.B. Pritzker's gubernatorial campaign become stifled in damage control mode has been very sad and disturbing, a disturbing debacle to watch and witness. For decades, Democratic leaders, party hacks, and elitists have padded the coffers of themselves and their friends, while the masses in Illinois have been left out in the cold. But now, since race is in the campaign conversation, I believe now is the appropriate time for African Americans in Illinois to demand their fair share from the state's Democratic Party for being its most reliable and devout constituency. We need promises and commitment from this party, not rhetoric and alibis. The Democratic Party is weaker than ever, and they need our they need our demographic like never before. Nevertheless, we are consistently shown that there is no vision of inclusivity for us, the marginalized and the oppressed. Their primary selling point to us these days is that at least they're not as racist as them old Republicans. Far too long, African Americans have been written off by the Republicans and taken for granted by the Democrats. Let's seize the moment in history. While they are fighting over our votes, let's demand some substantive reciprocity. Black voters must matter more than just during election season. This must stop. I humbly suggest that rather than passing judgment on JP's stupid and unfortunate remarks and accepting the alibis of his allies, they're saying he's not a racist guy because they know his heart. Let's assess each candidate's stance on the major issues that affect our community. What matters most to me in this election is the position and the commitment of each candidate, what they had, their stance on equitable funding, prison reform, increasing the flow of jobs, and stemming the tide of violence. The candidate who has a formidable plan and who's willing to be an agent of change is the candidate for me, and I believe the candidate for our community. Quite frankly, I could care less if he likes me or not. This is my perspective. Hopefully, I don't sound like one of those offensive blacks. I'm actually not angry. I'm just analytical and looking for change. Give me some feedback. What's your thought on this whole situation?
I mean,
that's my take.
I like your statement. I think that, for all of my life, we've been talking about plantation politics.
Ooh.
And for young people that don't know what that is, this is what that is. It means that other people pick your leaders. No other community stands for
No
that.
other community.
And that was really what the backdrop J.B. Pritzker's remarks.
You're giving
were,
us some real context.
This is
Thank
the
you.
way that people view our community. They decide who represents us, and no other community stands for that. And so when they decide we want the least offensive black,
Explain
and then put
to
that
me
in front of you.
and the masses. I mean, not that you agree, but when white politicians in positions of power sit on their phone and they point to people who they view as the least offensive politician, what code word, what dog whistle language is that really?
That means the least offensive to white people. And so it means that other people pick our leaders and then put them in front of us because they suit their purposes. I mean, and in that respect,
Wow.
J.B. Pritzker is not the outlier. I mean,
He's the norm.
That was just the norm. That's
Gotcha.
that's a standard telephone call among white politicians. And so it means we are between a rock and a hard place. Republicans are so bad that it almost just doesn't leave you anywhere to go. But it's a bad place to be when the other party knows you have nowhere to go. I remember when I studied political science years ago, 40 years ago, and I just remember.
It's a long time ago.
The standard phrase was, "The blacks have nowhere else to go."
Sure.
And that's a bad place to be. We're simply going to have to be a lot more creative in the way we do politics.
There was a ministers' meeting, Reverend. There was a ministers' meeting that was hosted by JB's camp.
That we were not there.
We were not there.
Somebody looked like you, but that wasn't you.
I saw a guy in the back that looked like you. But I put on
was
my
not me.
bifocals glass. It wasn't you.
I don't go to those kind of meetings much anymore.
Is it fair for every minister that was at that meeting to be bashed?
No.
Explain.
I mean, I don't understand always why people target the people. That's part of the desperation of the black community, is that because we're available,
Sure.
because we're accessible, then we become the targets of the angst of people. I mean, but the real people with real power in our community are not confronted like that. And so to me, it's just a smokescreen. Let's go bash. Let's go beat up the preachers. For the most part, I mean, you know, the pastors I know, I mean, are working real hard, trying to do the best they can, do what they can with meager resources, with people with meager resources.
Working hard every
and try
day.
to make a difference, yeah. So
312-738-1060. You can call and speak to the chairman of the board of Chicago State University, Reverend Marshall Hatch. And if you want to ask him anything about issues locally as it relates to politics, this is not a religious program, no questions on theology, but we're trying to figure out the lay of the land in this race. Let me ask you this, Marshall. This particular JB wiretap, how should we have really responded to this debacle as a community?
Well, I think people are offended. I think people in the grassroots are offended. I was just, one of the young attorneys today, listening to her. She's offended. And I think people should be. And I think, if you can use offense or anger to energize people, then it becomes productive. I mean, if it compels people to be more active, to be more likely to vote for or against a candidate, then actually, I mean, that
Sure.
emotion has produced something.
Yeah. But my thing is this: it seems like the candidates who try to display a degree of independence in our community, other blacks are the ones who cut them off, who make their way difficult.
We've been trained to do that. I mean, it's like, Nat Turner was really turned in by somebody else who was black. It's age old.
Now, but we must explain that it's not that we have less integrity than anybody. It's the conditions have produced this scenario, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the conditions produce this kind of deception. I mean, where people, for whatever their reasons are, try to gain what they can, even if it's off the back of somebody else black. But I mean, there's just it could be conspiratorial, but for whatever reason,
Sure.
I mean, the goal is to keep independent voices down in the black community. You know it, and I know
Absolutely.
it, and that's the way this town operates.
We got a caller on the line. Caller, welcome to the show. All hands
Good
on
evening,
deck.
gentlemen.
State your comment or question.
Good evening, gentlemen. What I know is a lot of times when I be around in my community, different types of functions, and it seems like you throw a few things or crumbs to the black community, and they'll come out and vote. And when they talk about, well, they're going to cut this service, going to take that out, and then that like perk people's ears up. And a lot of people don't realize what is the purpose of your alderman and your ward committeeman and your state rep and your state senator. And unfortunately, a lot of people say, well, if I come out to vote, what's going to be in it for me? And they be thinking those different offices is like the employment office. And they don't understand a lot of times when you don't come out and vote, a lot of decisions is made in terms of services. And they don't care unless they talking about, well, are you going to give me a job? Or you going to give me a check and a chicken sandwich?
Thank you so much for your comment. Thank you for sharing. I think it's very important for us to know that we have power when we vote. And that's why I was a part of a press conference today with people who are supporters of Congressman Danny Davis and Commissioner Richard Boykin, talking about the early voting that begins on February 21st. Any other comments you'd like to add?
Now, I would have loved to have been there as well, but I think the caller's making a good point. You know, the old adage, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. I mean, so you have to have independent voices seated at the table, represent your interests. The problem I have with the way we function in, for example, the Democratic coalition, you know, we get nothing out of Republicans, but here we are in the Democratic coalition, and so when you see the labor unions come in, the trade unions, from which we are systematically excluded.
Absolutely.
Because of the way they function with apprenticeships,
Sure.
cronyism, nepotism.
Sure.
And so we've just been iced out of that. So when you see the labor unions, the women, the LGBT, and the blacks,
Sure.
it means that, you know, the labor unions get to keep their slice of the pie, the trade unionists, which means a huge part of the pie, which is really the capital budget.
Absolutely.
And so they get to build the roads, the public buildings, and so on and so forth. And then what do we get? You get to keep your link card.
Right.
You know, or
You get to keep Section 8.
you get
You get
$40 million out of a $35 billion budget for your violence programs.
You get
maybe.
summer jobs. Give me
Yeah.
a break. We got another caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Be real quick. We only had limited time. Caller, welcome to All Hands on Deck.
Hey, Dr. Acri, this is Dr. Crowder calling in.
Hey, my brother, Dr. Crowder, how you doing? Thanks for calling in, old buddy. Got Reverend Hatch in the studio. We got a doctor on the line, and we got a doctor in the studio, and a paramedic as the host. So, so let me ask you, man.
How
You
you
one of the
doing,
hardest
Dr.
working
Hatch?
men out here. You were with us this morning. You helped organize that early vote press conference. You were very passionate. You had some great home run hitting clergy there who are so eloquent with their speeches. We're going to have you in for a little more extended presentation, but give me a good stump speech real quick why it's so important for us to get everybody riled up for a great turnout early.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Dr. Hatch, it's good to know that you're there.
Absolutely.
We certainly appreciate all the work that you are doing. And of course, Dr. Acri, we honor you, your service, and the wonderful ministry that you provide for
Thank
Cook
you.
County and
Thank you.
Chicagoland. Listen, here it is. If you are an African American in this country, voting ought to be a cherished commodity. When you think about it, when you think about what it took to get the vote, people died. People died. And if they didn't die, the emotional challenges that we went through to get the vote, think about it, the literacy test, the memorization test, the grandfather clause, people would ask you how many pieces of candy are in a bowl.
Sure.
We've went through a lot to get this vote, and we should not take it for granted. It's critically important that folk vote in this election cycle. We know what happened 4 years ago. We got Rauner. We know what happened last November. We got Trump. And now we got problems with health care. We got problems with taxes, and we got problems with judges. Let's go vote. Early voting starts tomorrow. Let's get to the polls and do what's right.
And somebody said the other day, vote early and often. Absolutely.
Yes.
Listen, man, I appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I know you're very busy, but I wanted you to come on and just put some fire up under the people's feet, because we were stating earlier today that don't just look at one day on the calendar and say, this is the day I'm going to vote, because anything could happen. Any kind of hurdle could come on. You could have, you wake up that morning with the flu, right?
Absolutely.
And strapped to the bed. You may have a family emergency that day before and have to leave out of the town, out of the city. So if you got multiple days ahead, do it. You know, it's very important that we take advantage of the early voters. I think we got a call on the line. I don't know if it's for you, Dr. Crowder, or Dr. Hatch. Welcome to the show. State your comment or question real quick. It's fired up in the studio.
Yes,
we got some major players. Come on, welcome to the show.
It's a great show as always.
Pardon me?
Hello?
Go ahead with your comment.
Yes. Okay, you know, great show as always. You have everybody up to doctors and EMTs, and now you have a proud veteran who fought for his country during Vietnam. And I wanted to say this from the heart. People don't vote for the best person. They vote for color or they vote for name. And they keep on, and I'll tell you why. Look at all, we fought hard, Hispanic and black, to get the majority, of aldermen. And guess what? It only got worse.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for calling. Reverend Hatch?
Yeah, I mean, the caller makes a great point. I mean, it's one thing to say everybody vote, but of course we want informed voters and people who have some voter education and understanding how to vote their interest. The caller makes a great point.
Dr. Crowder, before you go, I want to ask you, since you're part of the campaign for Richard Boykin, what's the deal with the unions supporting his opponent with hundreds of thousands of dollars?
It's really outlandish when you think about it. Commissioner Boykin has been the most progressive Cook County commissioner that we've had. In fact, Congressman Danny K. Davis says he's been the most prolific commissioner in a generation. So why would you line up against a person of this quality and then sink hundreds of thousands of dollars against him? I'll tell you why. It's because the commissioner led the charge. Commissioner Boykin led the charge to get that soda pop tax repealed. And they are upset about that, and they don't want to let it go. But the commissioner is running on his record. He's done a lot, and he's got a lot more to do. And that's why we're fighting every day, making calls and drumming up support to make sure that he gets back there. Listen, that seat, that first district seat, doesn't belong to the unions, the union leadership bosses, doesn't belong to the political powers that are downtown. It belongs to the people of the first district. And the commissioner is going to fight every day to make sure that it stays that way.
Dr. Crowder, thank you,
Yes,
buddy.
sir.
We look forward to having
Appreciate
you on to talk some more local politics with you. God bless you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Hatch,
God
you
bless you,
made a case in
Dr.
point.
Ackery.
Well, I tell you, Richard Boykin is one of the most independent voices we have out there, and he's done just about as much with a commissioner seat that I've ever seen anybody do. I mean,
Can you name 5 other commissioners? You know, that's the real question.
Only if you've been watching real close.
Absolutely.
But his name, of course, sticks out, and more than anything else, his has been an independent voice.
Independent voice. What we've been talking about throughout the duration of the show. It's hot in the studio. All hands on deck. Caller, real quick. Welcome to the show.
You know, it used to be an honor. A couple of callers ago talking about how privileged we are to have our votes. As when I was a youngster, the men in the house, my uncle, my father, my grandfather, they used to get dressed and clean and shave and take us as kids with
That's
them
right.
to it. But now these days, there's no one in the house to do that. So we need to get back sometimes to the old way. Listen, just making a quick comment. Thanks for taking the call.
Thank you so much. Great callers today.
Great caller. I mean, you know, it's a tradition in my house. You know, I don't wear wide brim hats all the time, but I got a couple of them, and my kids have grown up in my household knowing that when it comes time to vote, I put on my wide brim hat. I mean, it's a ritual. My wife gets up a little extra early, and we walk to the polls in our neighborhood, greet our neighbors, and of course, you know, never have to show any ID because they already know we the Hatch family.
Yeah.
And so the caller makes a point. It really should be really a family ritual.
Absolutely.
Because you're doing that kind of education when your kids are small, that this is a civic duty. You're getting up to do your civic duty.
Reverend, there was a disturbing video after the ministers' meeting with JB, and one thing that really emerged from that is the fact that there is a lack of trust between our generation. It's not just faith leaders, but politicians, business leaders. There's a generation gap. There's a lack of trust between our generation and the millennials. What can we do to bridge that gap? Because unity is our real key for bringing this community to another dimension.
Well, you know, I think we've all been, I mean, some of us believe we're kind of young now still, but we've all been younger.
Sure.
And you know, it's kind of like, you know, always youthful energy and creativity is needed, but it's just kind of like a horse. It doesn't do you any good till you hitch it to a wagon. I mean,
That's right.
it's got to be purposeful. And you have to try to figure out, you know, what was the purpose of that demonstration.
Sure.
I couldn't see anything creative out of it
No.
other than, you know, showing dysfunction and disunity.
disrespect.
Yeah, disrespect. Yeah, so
How many F-bombs can you
yeah,
throw at your elders?
How how disrespectful can you be? I mean, that's not really something that's going to be productive in the long run.
What can we do? Because I know some of these guys you've reached out to try to mentor.
Yeah.
And long as you were given, they were there to receive. But I just, as a person sitting on the outside looking in, it seems like people don't really want the mentorship that they need. But we need to get there, though.
Yeah, and and it's the teaching. I mean, that, you know, you have to be reciprocal. I mean, there was a young man, you know, I helped him and his organization. And then, you know, I showed up at an event or two, and I mean, it was as if I hadn't helped him at all.
Sure.
And so it's just, you know, I've raised my own children. I mean, you have to be reciprocal in relationships, no matter how old you are.
Yeah, and let me quote Reverend Al Sharpton, a message that he said. Since I'm not in church, I can say this. He made a comment about respecting your elders. He said something like this: other communities water their roots, and we piss on ours. And that is a diabolical way of putting it, but we must be careful not to do that.
It's a part of our dysfunction. I think we got a tremendous teaching moment with this movie Panther.
Sure.
Because it really speaks right to your point. And I think that there's a lot of subliminal messages
Sure.
in that movie.
Oh, we got to get you back to talk about that.
And one of them was just your point. I mean,
Yes.
you know, that in a proper culture, in an African culture,
Right. Tell it.
elders are respected.
You got 10 seconds. Hit it
Wisdom
hard.
is respected, and young people understand that they're part of a continuum. They didn't just fall out the air.
Woo! You heard it first here, Reverend Dr. Marshall Hatch. We'll see you next week. But listen, tomorrow, quick announcement. American Job Center will be on the west side at Greater St. John Church, 1256 North Waller, 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. You're looking for jobs, you're looking for job leads, and you're looking for some workforce development, see you at Greater St.
And the
John.
Leaders Network basketball tournament this weekend at Christ the King.
That's right.
10 to 5 on Saturday, 3 to 6 on Sunday.
Greater St. John's going to try to take that championship. God bless you. See you
Them
next
going
week.
to try harder.